I like cars, but I'm not a car guy. So when I open the hood of an engine, if I don't understand at all what's going on, I have no hope to fix it. No amount of trial and error will fix it, right? I'll mess things up or I'll just make different problems pop up instead of the ones I have. And your golf swing's the same way. You gotta, we said at the start of the show we're gonna start with mistakes. I guess we're getting into what the first mistake is, right? Which is people don't pop open the hood and actually learn anything about what their golf swing is doing. They just hit golf balls and try to guess their way into correcting it.
Move further from it, move the ball more forward, bend over one day, get a little closer to the ball another day. They're just guessing, and they don't really understand. So having an understanding of we're done that one. We're not getting into it. We're done that one. The next one to me is sticking with it then. So first you got to understand what's wrong. Then you got to work at it.
Absolutely.
And I call it the shiny ball trick. And this is the PGA of America Golf Show. The what trick can I get here? What club can I buy? What teaching aid will fix me? I had an interesting thing happen. My roommate from college showed up at this golf show. Great player, won the Western Junior. His son was there, 16-year-old kid, working with Jim McLean down in Miami. They got a lot of money, so he's working with Jim McLean down in Miami. And we're going around, and I said to the young man, what are you looking for? A putting aid. And I said, well, what do you want to fix? And he said, my putting. And I'm like, well, whoa, it doesn't work like that. Like, there's a million putting teaching aids, and each one will attack a certain thing. What's wrong with your putting stroke? Is it your rhythm? Is it your setup? Is it your alignment? Is it the pace of your stroke? Is it, what's wrong? Is it moving your wrist? It can be 100 things, and a teaching aid will fix that. But that shiny ball idea of fixing something, I'm just going to fix it. Or if I buy this club, everything will be better. If I buy whatever teaching aid, whether it's Putt View or, that magically everything will be better. And instead of having the information and then kind of working at it instead of just thinking a trick will work. Like, Jim, yesterday I played with Jim, and Jim stands closer to the ball than me. So I stood close to the ball, and I had a pretty good back nine. So now I'm going to start standing closer to the ball.
Yeah.
Well, why are you standing closer to the ball? What does that do to your swing? Does it change the path? Does it change the... you need to understand this stuff. So golfers just need to engage a little more in self-reliance. You do need a golf pro to help you explain it, but then you need to be a little more structured and honest with where you actually are, and just get yourself understanding and a little kind of dedicated, structured work, and you will get better. There's no question you'll get better. Back to the diet thing. If you eat a little better, if you understand what's good for your body, and you eat a little better and exercise a little more, things will get a little better. It's just the way it works.
Well, to draw the parallel even further to the diet industry, and this is where I think the best parallel is it's patience. It takes time, right? Let's say you put on 10 pounds in a couple of years. It took you 2 years to put the weight on. You think you're going to get it off in 2 weeks? People want, and like you said, the shiny ball aspect, people want those quick fixes.
Yeah.
But even if you find a teaching aid that might be the perfect thing to fix what you're
it's not going to change in
a day,
2 buckets of balls,
right?
Yeah.
So the point of the teaching aid is that you should be repeating with it to make the new version of what you're doing the new reality.
You like that 10,000 repetitions thing to create a habit? Do you think that's good? So that's
10,000. I think it's too simple because I think how far off.
That's 100 buckets of balls, by the way.
Yeah. Well, I think how far off something is from your norm, and the way that you work on something will change that number. I think the 10,000 is a convenient way to say it, but I think the principle, there's something to the principle of it.
Yeah, to give people hope, though, I think they can put a teaching aid on their putter, and the first putt can be better. So
Absolutely.
It doesn't take 10,000 to make it better. What I think the 10,000 is about is that subconscious habit. So that is now your putting stroke. You don't have to even think about it anymore. Like if you stood open and for 100 buckets of balls at 100 balls, you use that alignment aid. At the end of that time, you could take the alignment aid off, and that alignment would be your new norm.
Yes.
Right? So I think you need that many repetitions to create a subconscious new norm. But I think you can put a teaching aid on and play better right away. And if you're working at it and focusing properly.
Yeah, because it'll give you the feeling of what to recreate.
Correct.
Right? It'll give you the feeling of what it feels like to be right, and it might not feel natural. And I think for some people, that's a hurdle they have to get over, is you make a change and it doesn't feel natural, so you don't want to keep doing it. A great example, I'll use one for myself. I have a little bit of scoliosis in my lower spine. It's minor. It doesn't cause a lot of problems. but it means I like to sit my hips open because the bottom of my spine curves in a way that I'm more comfortable that way. So I have a little shift of my hip that I do every time I stand over a golf ball. To this day, I've been doing it for years since I learned about the problem. It doesn't feel 100% as
But if
natural as
you
just
didn't
standing there.
know you had that, if you didn't take the time to realize that your hips are open, it's always going to affect your ball flight. It's always going to
100%,
affect your,
which is why
your
I do it.
kinematic unwind, everything,
Yeah,
right?
which is why I do it, even though, I mean, it would feel more comfortable just to stand as my body's standing. And for the record, I'm not saying I feel uncomfortable every time over the golf ball. It's just a quick little switch.
Number
But-
three, let's move it along. But people really, and this is an important one, they only practice in the springtime, right? So,
Yeah, well, that's the Groundhog Day aspect we were talking about.
well,
Every year.
Groundhog Year for me, we're super busy in March and April and May. And in September, it can be a beautiful day out, 22 Celsius, and there's 3 people hitting golf balls. So, creating an understanding that every ball you hit better with a better grip will make that grip feel better to you and will make you a better player. And whether you start that process March 1st or you decide in September, from now on, I'm going to try to change where my hand is on that club, it's productive. I even say to people, if you take a lesson in October and I teach you ball position, you don't forget it over winter. You don't have to wait till
Yeah,
next spring to
that's a
take
big-
a lesson
That's a big
on
fallacy,
ball
isn't it?
position. It really is.
People think, well, if I start now over the winter, I'll forget and go back to my old habit. But you're not giving yourself enough credit. First of all, like, you're not all of a sudden going to go, squirrel, I forgot what everything I did, what's going on. Like, you're going to remember what you're working on. And it's better to have done some reps than not done some reps.
It makes me feel more calm when I'm over the ball that I'm working on something productive. So it blends into that information thing and the working at it thing. There is no right time or wrong time, more importantly, to work at something. And I can show you my revenue numbers for the last 30 years. And we're so much busier in the spring than the fall. It's crazy. I know there's a passion, there's an anxiousness here
There's
in
an itch.
Canada because you've been locked up
Yep.
all winter. I get that, the enthusiasm to play more. But the idea that just, hitting balls in the spring is another one of those big mistakes people make. They've got to just think of their golf game as an ongoing thing during their cycle of life. And whenever you kind of improve things, it's a positive. So that's another one.
Yeah, the way you said that, it's not the mistake to hit the balls in the spring. It's the mistake to not hit the balls in the fall,
Correct.
right? Make it a more consistent effort, even if that means you might hit a few less balls in the spring because you're going, well, I can't keep that pace up. Develop a pace of practice that's good for you and maintain it year round if you can.
Too many full shots, another one. I mean,
As part of that
if
practice,
people
for
listen to
sure.
our first podcast, it might be a little rough, but if people listen to our first podcast, I think I called that one, or we called that one, 7 silos, right?
Yes.
So in my teaching, over the years, I've developed these elements to a complete player through our junior coaching. You got your ball striking or your swing. You've got your short game, all your little shots around the green, not on the green, but around the complex of the green, from bunkers to chips to pitches to flop shots, all that stuff. Then you've got your putting. You've got your short putts where alignment and technique is so important to make that 3-footer. You've got your longer putts where you introduce feel and a little bit of artistry into it. So you've got putting games, different elements to that. Then you've got your overall health, which includes strength and fitness and restfulness and nutrition and all of that. You've got your equipment getting fitted properly. Then you've got your decision making, which includes some of the mistakes people are making here, but even stuff like, should I go for the green or lay up? That's your mental game. And then your emotional game, which is where your uncle is. That's his lane, right? The EI stuff John works so much with, which includes things like focus, self-confidence, resilience, self-reliance, all the different emotional elements. Do you get scared on the tee? Why are you nervous? Back to people don't have an understanding. They're always nervous on the
a big
first
part of
tee
it.
because they don't know why they slice it. So they can't even fix it. And it creates this anxiousness in them. So you've got all these 7 silos. So the next mistake people make is all they do is hit balls. They think that the game of golf is about how well they hit balls, which there might be an irony here to people because we make money with people hitting buckets of balls. So it's this paradigm is a good thing for us, but you got to work on everything. You got to sit down and work on all the elements and figure out which ones you're good at and which ones you're weak at. And people they flat out hit too many balls in the spring and they flat out just hit too many full shots. That's all they do to work on their golf game.
Yeah, I mean, Full ball striking is the easiest thing to identify a problem with because it's the most visceral thing of the game. You know, when you hit a bad shot, you notice it more. You know, we see that a lot with, for example, people evaluating their own putting. They'll miss a putt by 4 inches of the hole. You know, they'll miss the putt by a significant amount. They go, "Oh, I almost made it." And if you understand how the mechanics work, no, you didn't. You weren't even close to making it. And it was a straight putt, so it wasn't the break that you misread. It was you missed the technique by that much. That's the same as hooking a drive into the woods, but it doesn't feel the same way as hooking a drive into the woods.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that, you know, obviously...
Same goes with making a bad decision. Same goes with not, you know, well, we don't want to get into other ones yet, but anything you don't do properly is just as important as putting a bad swing on a driver.
Yeah, so obviously, you know, ball striking is an important component of the game, and if you're not at a certain level with it, it's hard to really get good at it. But the amount of time you dedicated to it is, agreed, too high in proportion to the...
Yeah, I also think there's a
nature of it.
fallacy with golfers. They think that they have to do better than they do. There
It's a
are
major one.
well, the stats on tour, right? The average, like Phil Mickelson's below 50% on fairways hit, and there's guys on the PGA Tour who hit 60% of greens in a year, and they make $1 million a year on the PGA Tour.
Yeah,
so
the best players,
you don't need to perfect your ball striking to enjoy golf and get better at it. And I think people think the other thing that's part of that, Jake.
Well, no, but you know what? Ironically, or I guess coincidentally, the reason why everyone thinks that way is because they haven't worked on the other parts of their game. So their short games aren't good enough to bail them out of the mistakes that they're bound to have. That's the difference, right? The tour pros understand that you have to work on every aspect. So they do miss greens, but then they get up and down when they miss the green. And most people at a golf course, they miss the green and they probably wind up making a bogey because they're either not pitching it close enough or making a putt they should be making.
Yeah, this really might even link into the understanding thing again, that PGA Tour pros understand strengths and weaknesses and where they need to practice. It's way more important to be able to make a 3-footer than to hit every fairway. It's way more important to get good in the bunker than it is to, because you're going to miss, statistically, you're going to miss 30% of greens.
Yes.
So if you can get up and down 25% of the 30%, you're going to be a way better golfer than if you can just hit a couple more fairways.
And these are assuming that you're tour pros. If you're the average Joe, you're statistically going to miss more greens. So it's even more important proportionally to your game to have a pretty good short game. But it's one of those things that, again, people don't look in the mirror and become self-aware enough about how golf works for them. And they think that if they just chase the secret, they will hit the ball better.
All right, so the next mistake is tied into the same one. So if that mistake is too many full swings.
Yes.
The other part of that, subsection, if you will, or its own number, too many big swings. I mean, the idea in golf is to be in balance, be aligned and in balance, and have timing and rhythm between the moving of the body and the arms. The best way to do that is with smaller motions, to groove your body to move the way you want it to move. Hitting driver after driver is like the worst thing you can do. And my analogy is always the changing of the skier. The ski coach, the teacher, or even just yourself, you'll always go to the smaller hill to work on your technique of turning and going through the moguls or whatever. It is ludicrous for someone who wants to change the way they pivot into a mogul, or, you know, to go to the steepest hill on the mountain, and they'll be going so fast that it's just a blur and they end up just wiping out and having a yard sale. You can't change the way your body moves at the highest speed it can move. I mean, what you need to do, so if you're hitting a driver, your old habits will keep coming into play because that club's moving 100 miles an hour. Whereas if you hit little 3/4 wedges, you can really put your arms in the place you want to put them. You can feel what it's like to speed your arms up, to slow them down. You can change the way your hips move. You can work on your side bend. You can do whatever you need to do to become a better player at slow speed. Now, eventually, you crawl, then you walk quickly, then you jog, then you run, then you run a marathon. Eventually, you're hitting those drivers to see what the result is of all your work. But practice is not about hitting a bunch of long clubs. Practice is about making your body do what you want it to do. And that's another huge mistake golfers make. That driver comes out of the bag right away. And they think if they hit a driver 1 million times, they'll hit it 1 million times better. But if there's no understanding, and if they're making the same mistake every time, nothing will ever improve. it's Groundhog Day. We're back to Bill Murray.
Yeah, not to mention, I mean, such an intrinsic part of good golf is your tempo, that the fact that when you whale on driver you don't practice tempo is another completely different but tied in point to it. I mean, a great example, Tony Finau, I mean, he just lost in a playoff at the Waste Management, but almost won this week. And everyone always comments about how they don't understand how he hits it so far with what looks like a 3/4 swing. It's because you'd hit it farther if he had a bigger swing. He's just learned that at that length of swing and tempo, he hits it far enough to be in play on the tour, but he hits it the best, right? He found the tempo and the speed that works the best for him, even though he's obviously capable of more.
Yeah, they did that in Golf Digest last year, didn't they? With him, he took some, or was that on YouTube? I saw
No,
he took some full swings and hit it
on
quite a
Instagram.
bit farther. But
Yeah, on Instagram, he did a thing. He and his coach, just for fun, tried to get to 200 miles an hour of ball speed, which is world long drive numbers. I mean, that is staggering. And he did it when he was trying to go full bore, but he doesn't hit it straight, so he doesn't do it. And people get on the driving range, and I know we just made this point, so I don't want to rehash.
yeah,
the
be
exact same
careful.
point.
I don't want people to think that if they make a half swing,
No, you have to be committed to the action, right? I'm making it good clarification. Tempo and how hard you swing are two separate notes, right? Tempo is how you swing, the rhythm of the motion. Speed of swing is how fast a swing is. And what I'm saying is that Tony, by slowing it down a little bit, has better tempo, better transition. He's able to hit the ball more squarely. So he hits the ball plenty far with that golf swing.
yeah, it's also he's practiced that a million. It worked for him probably when he was a young kid. He kept doing it. It's now his kind of DNA golf swing stamp, if you
Yes.
will. That's his golf swing.
Yeah, for
So
sure.
he's not going to change it. But it's clearly, he shot 62, I think, on Saturday, a swing that is incredibly repeating for him, incredibly dependable, and incredibly serviceable. So he doesn't need to try to swing better.
No,
or
so
bigger.
So the thing that everybody can learn from that, and it ties very well into your point about, people need to do soft swings to learn where their body should be and make changes. Slower, more rhythmic swings to learn what it feels like to strike the middle of the face and have quality ball striking is equally as important.
Yeah, if you control your body and you control the path of the club and you synchronize those two together, that's the game, right? 'Cause
Absolutely.
that controls the club face, which controls the ball flight. It's really a ball flight game. Higher, lower, curving one way, curving the other. And if you can't control your body, you can't control the way the club face hits the ball and the way the ball flies. So it's really all about body control. So lots more attention to littler shots, shorter shots, lots more attention to around the green, on the green, lots more attention to every silo in your game, and less drivers. Less practice in the spring solely, and less drivers. And what do we see? We see people whacking drivers in the spring year after year after year.
Yeah,
after
again,
year.
it's not less practice in the swing. It's less fall off from your practice in the spring.
Yeah.
Practice all year.
Yeah, I love people to practice
Yeah.
as much as they do in the springtime every day. Like you said, though, lives get in the way a little bit. All right. The other thing is, and listen, mistakes people make, Jake, this list could be very long, but we're keeping it down to 6 or 7 or 8 here. Another one is they don't give themselves enough time to do things. I'd rather people did a little less, but did it properly. And I think about game day. People get to the golf course 5 minutes before they tee off. They whack a couple of putts. They do their shoelaces up and tee off. If you really want to work at playing better, you've got to prepare properly. Get your body loosened up and warmed up and figure out what your swing feels like that day to play better. So, preparing to play better, practicing better, hit less buckets, but hit them more carefully. Just spending more time preparing and focusing and paying attention is really important. And, I guess the mistake to me is the game day. Just running to the course, playing, and then racing home. Instead of saying, okay, every day I play this year, I'm going to warm up for 40 minutes. I'm going to, start with my wedge and go through my driver. Then I'm going to hit a few chips and pitches. Then I'm going to hit a few putts to know the greens, and then I'll tee off. So I'm ready to play. And I would even ask people to think about the course and their strategy, how they're going to play that course a little bit that day. Prepare properly. Get ready. Don't just stand on that first tee and, with this stiff kind of not ready golf swing.
Okay, so I have a very fair question that
Sure.
most people are probably thinking. Kevin, I don't have the time for that. How do you deal with that?
That's my point. I'd rather people play less. Say, okay, instead of 3 times a week, I'm going to play 2 times a week. But, on those days, instead of taking 4 hours, I'm going to take 5. And I'm going to warm up properly. And I think people would find it makes an incredible difference. Same with buckets of balls. Instead of whacking out 2 buckets with your driver, hit 1 bucket and pitch at targets. And then work through your swing. Hit to 1 flag on the range area, then hit to another flag, and then try to hit a few draws, then try to hit a few fades.
Yeah, more dynamic
Be way
practice.
more thoughtful about what you're doing, right? Which again can go into on the course, thinking about, should I lay up here? Should I go for it? Should I leave my ball on the left side of the green, the right side of the green? All the elements that go into making a better golfer. But the preparation and the thoughtfulness is really critical. And that's another thing I just don't see people doing and never have. And it doesn't change, right? We've got all these mistakes that people keep doing over and over again.
Yeah, of all of the mistakes, it's the one that I understand the most because time is such a factor in that issue that people don't feel like they have the time. But it's one of those things that if you care enough about how you play, you have to find a way to make that part of the process to really improve, right?
Why not commit to something?
Everyone has a story of the day they slammed the trunk and played well, and hey, I didn't even warm up that day, and I felt so loose, and it was great. But that's not going to happen very often, and it's not going to be your norm. And actually, no one understands not having time to play more than me because I don't play much in the summer anymore because we're so busy teaching, which is unfortunate. But if you want to play well and you want to practice well, quality over quantity. As stupid and cliche as that is, it's quality over quantity, right? And I understand, but maybe instead of playing 18 holes after work, play 9, and that seems less fun, but you'll be better.
Think about what will make you a better player and what will be the more rewarding thing. You're right, Jake. Maybe going and picking your kids up and after work and going out after dinner and playing 9 holes with your son or your daughter and dropping a few balls and pitching them and just doing that might be better for you as a golfer than just trying to get that Saturday morning tee time and racing out there and getting home by 11.
I would also argue that that's more fun. Yeah. I would say that
find what's right for you, but make it productive. Again, make it productive. You change something.
Yeah, I mean, you can boil this whole list down to, frankly, being honest with yourself and engaging with your process more dynamically.
Being thoughtful.
Right? A better engagement with your own process. I think a lot of people hear us say, here's the top 6 mistakes or top 10, or pick your list of mistakes golfers make, and it sounds cynical, and here's all the things you're doing wrong, like a school lecture. But it's really more of here are the things that we notice as a trend that people aren't doing, and here are your opportunities to engage with your golf game differently in very accessible, easy to do ways that can make you better over time.
Well, there is a great frustration of what we do for a living, Jake, because we all know, coaching fixes people, or fixes them. That doesn't sound right. Coaching makes them better players.
We actually don't fix people. We help people fix themselves.
But being thoughtful. So, at a golf lesson, you sit down with the person and say, okay, what's the strength of your game? What's the weakness? You ask them those questions that they maybe haven't thought to ask themselves. Do you warm up properly? How many times a week do you play? What's the worst part of your game? What's the best part of your game? Describe your style on the course. What makes you nervous on the course? What makes you anxious? What gives you confidence? If you force people to ask all those questions, they start to figure it out. How many drives do you hit in a bucket of balls? How many 7-irons? How often do you work on rhythm in your swing? How often do you work on this? All of these kind of coaching elements where you really develop a relationship with the golfer are the things that really make the difference for them, right?
Yes.
And, the mistakes is just a way of coining it. It's not to emphasize the negative, but it is certainly, and this is again back to my Super Bowl ad with Bill Murray, the Groundhog Day of teaching this game or trying to help people play better. My great frustration is it's not that hard to get better at golf. It really is not.
No, it just takes time.
If you get a little information and you practice the right things and you're a little more thoughtful and organized, you can definitely, every single person listening to this podcast can get better, but they've got to change. They can't keep doing the Golf Town driver and the play Saturday morning and they hit a bunch of buckets of drivers in the spring thing and the trying the trick their buddy tells them. All of these things keep Just keep happening.
Yeah,
All right,
and
last one. Number 7 for today, and then we're going to...
well, hold on. I want to make a quick point because
Sure.
people conflate time and difficulty. That's one thing to understand. What we're saying is if you're patient, it's not that hard. It just takes time. Just because something takes a while doesn't mean it's difficult, right? It just takes repetition and time. And if you put the effort in, it might take someone a month because they're hitting more balls than you, but you can do the exact same change in a year or 2 years or whatever, as long as you're chipping at the process
Sure.
over time, right? But just because it takes a while doesn't mean it's going to be hard. Enjoy it and do it.
Yeah, that's the fun of golf.
Yeah.
The journey is more fun than the destination. That's the challenge of the game. That's the fun of the game. Work at all those elements, figure out where your weaknesses are, work on them a little bit. That's why golf's like an onion with layers and layers and layers to it. It's
Very Shrek of you.
fantastic game. It is very Shrek of me. Last thing, you don't reflect enough. You don't figure out what's wrong. You don't learn from mistakes. I love journaling. You know, we do it with our junior coaching kids. After you play a round of golf on your way home, everybody, go through the round in your mind. Figure out why you made those bogeys and doubles. Think about what caused those bogeys and doubles. If you hit it in the right woods all day, what's wrong with your golf swing that you have to go figure out to not do that? If you 3-putted 5 times, why are you missing those putts? If you always came up short with your pitch shots, what about your technique is causing that to happen, or your mindset where you're not taking the proper swing to get the ball to the hole? The answers are right there. They're always there, but you've got to reflect and think about them to really get better. And a lot of times it's emotions. I was nervous. I got to be honest with myself. I was pooping my pants out there. I was nervous and I choked. A lot of times it's decisions. Why did I try to hit the green punching out of the woods? Why didn't I lay up? A lot of times it's my equipment's lousy. The guys I'm playing with are hitting it 20 yards past me because my driver's 10 years old. A lot of times it's swing dynamics. A lot of times it's short game. A lot of times it's putting. You've got to reflect. Journaling makes sure it happens, but it's just a question of being a little thoughtful after you play. How many times? I've played so many times, Jake, with someone in a pro-am or something, and they miss a putt, and they're surprised at their own golf course. So you've been a member here 20 years, and you misread that putt? It actually, to me, you know, Groundhog Day again. How is that possible that in 20 years you haven't figured out how that putt breaks? But you see it all the time. People miss.
Yeah, well, part of that also, though, is people miss a putt because they hit the putt wrong. And then they go, I must have read it wrong, because they won't admit that they made a
But
mistake.
if they just sit down and figure it out, right?
Yeah.
But
But
listen, you can say that if you want, but if I go somewhere and I'm playing in a pro and I say, how does this putt break? And a guy says, oh, it's a little right to left. And I putt it and it breaks right. You know, it's like, you've been a member here 20 years and you don't know how that
Oh, yeah,
putt
that stuff
breaks.
happens all the time. The other one I love, the other example I love, and a lot of people probably have done this themselves, is, you know, we'll say to them, if you chip with a pitching wedge and it lands here, how far will it roll? And people's answer is, I don't know. And my
They've been
reaction,
chipping with an 8-iron for the last 30 years.
but even if I do say, if I hit an 8-iron from here to this point exactly, how far will it roll? And they go, I don't know. Well, then why are you doing that? Like, how does this work? It's just a matter
It's
of
fascinating.
It's just a matter of paying attention.
It's flight to roll ratios, right? We teach 10-year-olds this. If
Yes.
you chip with an 8-iron with this technique and this stance, the ball will fly 1 part, it'll roll 3 parts. That's what it'll do every single time you do it. So if you have a situation where you have 1 part flight and 3 parts roll, you use X club. It just works like
a
that.
9-iron for the record, everybody. If you're keeping
1
track,
to
that's
3.
a 9-iron.
Yeah, I'm just chatting here. But figuring out, hey, maybe I'm using my wrong club to chip because it only rolls 1 part and flies 1 part, right? Instead of a 1 to 3, 1 to 4, whatever it is.
Now, on the
All
flip
of it is
side,
reflection, and it's basically, Jake, our entire list of 7 here is about getting organized,
yes.
being more thoughtful, being more careful, and reflecting. It's all really not really about the technique as much as paying attention and learning and kind of unpeeling that onion 1 layer at a time and improving little parts of your game and learning from your mistakes, right? And that's
Yes.
what gets rid of Groundhog Day.
Now, the one thing I want to make sure that we pop in there too, because it gets really easy to say all the things you're doing wrong, is you also have to do all these things about what's good about your game too. Journaling's a great example, right? I think most people, one of the things that turns people off of journaling is they feel like they're just tearing themselves apart and they don't like the process. Also do the same reflection for what's going well. Why am I hitting it better today? Why did I make a birdie on this hole, but I didn't make a birdie on the other one? Why on everything? And sometimes by focusing on the positives, you can learn just as much as focusing on the negatives.
Yeah.
It's easier to make changes off
Unfortunately,
negative.
though, Jake, as a golf teacher, people shooting 100, they want to shoot 90. If they focus on what they do well, they're going to keep shooting what they shoot. You need to focus on the negative. You need to focus on what they need to change and
Yeah,
make better.
totally agreed. But totally agreed. But you still have to reflect on what's working well and maybe move in that direction, right? For
Absolutely.
example, if you're working on something, you have a good round, saying, what made me have a good round today? Why was today good? The next round, you can maybe replicate that feeling, right? Obviously.
Well, that also builds self-confidence. That builds optimism.
Yes.
Yes. You don't spend your life thinking of what's wrong and what else can I fix next, because it's a pretty demoralizing space to be in. But this show is about Groundhog Day of mistakes people are making. So you
for
kind of
sure.
got to focus on
No.
the mistakes they're making.
Absolutely. And most people don't focus on the mistakes they're making, and they have to. And I'm not saying that. It's just
Or changes they need to make, right?
yes, it's a process, and focus on the whole thing.